did the Paladin get nerfed in the 2024 D&D Player's Handbook?
Look how they massacred my boy.
There is much gnashing of teeth and wailing in certain corners of the internet thanks to the redesigned Dungeons & Dragons Paladin. While the Paladin has received several new or revised abilities designed to make the class more versatile, no one really cares about any of that, because the Paladin's Divine Smite ability received a pretty significant downgrade to prevent the Paladin from blasting everything from a goblin to Tiamat into oblivion with a series of smites on a single turn. Now, we'll explain the controversy and what it means for Paladin players, but first, why don't you go ahead and hit those like and subscribe buttons. So, in the 2014 D&D rule set, the Divine Smite ability that the Paladin has was an ability that wasn't tied to any sort of action, bonus action, or reaction. The ability worked pretty smoothly. When the Paladin hit with a melee attack, they could spend a spell slot to smite their foe. Because the Divine Smite wasn't bound to the action economy, it meant the Paladins could smite multiple times per turn as early as 2nd level when they got the ability. For example, if a Paladin used 2-weapon fighting or took the Polearm Master feat, they could smite with their attack action and smite again with an additional melee attack using a bonus action. Also, a Paladin could also smite if they got off an opportunity attack somehow. Functionally, this meant that at 2nd level, a Paladin could deal 4d8 of Divine Smite damage on a single turn, plus the damage from their weapons. It opened up the opportunity to deal some very hefty damage at some very low levels. Now, all Paladins could eventually smite a 2nd time per turn once they got the extra attack ability, and they could stack a Divine Smite with Smite spells if they had one prepared. This basically allowed the discerning Paladin to go supernova, especially if they hit an enemy with a crit of some kind. Paladin multi-class builds were also pretty popular, with the Paladin Sorcerer and the Paladin Warlock builds opening up all kinds of ridiculous combinations. Fun for Paladins, not so fun for DMs who had an encounter blowed up because the Paladin hit way beyond their weight class with a series of smites during a single round of combat. But with the 2024 rules, all of the smite stacking goes away. Now, the Divine Smite is a spell that can be cast as a bonus action. This means that a Paladin can only Divine Smite once per turn because they only have one bonus action per turn. And it's much harder to combine Divine Smite with other smites because, again, bonus action and also smites, you can't cast more than one level spell per turn. And they can't smite on opportunity attacks because when you take a reaction, you don't get a bonus action. And also, you can't smite with an attack triggered by a bonus action because, again, you only have one bonus action per turn. That's a pretty hefty penalty to Paladins, especially as the 2024 rule set has more abilities triggered by a bonus action. And while we don't have the full rule sets yet, we're guessing that the multi-class builds are also receiving the same sort of pretty hefty penalty. Now, I personally am of two minds about this. As someone who has spent 99% of their D&D career behind the DM screen, I don't really care about broken player abilities. If an adventure or an encounter gets ruined because a Paladin uses all of their Divine Smites all at once, it wasn't a particularly good encounter. If I know that a Paladin is going to nuke my big bad with a bunch of smites on a single turn, I let them. And then it turns out that my big bad has a second form, like Frieza. Or maybe the big bad has goons that keep the Paladin from getting to them. Or maybe the big bad is protected by a mystical barrier that needs to be interrupted somehow. Or maybe killing the big bad in the first turn of combat triggers something bad happening, which is the actual encounter. Basically, I never really had a strong opinion about broken Paladins because they never really disturbed any of my plans, because you either learn to work around your player abilities or you celebrate those player abilities. If the big bad's, mystic barrier gets interrupted, let the Paladin kill him, because that's the point of the encounter. But, of course, the 1% of the time that I wasn't behind the DM screen, I usually played as a Paladin, and part of that was because getting to do one thing really hard one time does make for fun encounters and some fun gameplay. And it kind of sucks that I don't get to do that now, assuming that I ever play D&D as a player and not as a DM.
Producer Pete here with a more player-focused Paladin breakdown. Honestly, losing access to Smite fundamentally changes what a Paladin even is in D&D's 2024 version. It really cripples their action economy, and doesn't seem to give much benefit. Paladins relied on lay on hands for healing for the most part, rarely use their spells for it, and only really use their spell slots for smite damage or to cast concentration smite spells for continual damage bonuses. By making the base smite a bonus action spell, not only do you lose a lot of damage potential, now you lose actions too, as you're using your spell and your bonus action every turn, making concentration smites like Branding Smite harder to cast because you're using up your one spell to Divine Smite with your bonus action every round. In a way, this gives the Paladin less choice, not more, which is counterintuitive to everything the D&D design team was claiming. Honestly, just making Divine Smite a once per turn ability and not a bonus action spell would have been vastly better for the Paladin as a player, and at least allowed them to use their spell slots and bonus actions for other things, to bring in some of that variety to the playstyle the design team claimed they wanted. So purely from a player perspective, this is pretty much a net loss all around for the Paladin.
Sure, will the Paladin be good for more than one round in combat? Probably. And is that a good thing? Probably. But it sure does feel like this is taking a bit of fun out of D&D, which seems counterintuitive to what all of these rule changes are supposedly all about. So, what do you think about the Paladin Divine Smite nerf? Do you think it's good or bad for Dungeons & Dragons? Let us know in the comment section, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons.